Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will talk about the HOA that wants access to my property. I had been saving for years and combing listings on my lunch breaks. Then I found it, a sunlit two-story place with a narrow front porch, a maple tree in the yard that looked like it would glow in October, and a kitchen that didn't make me want to swear at cabinets. The neighborhood had an HOA, which wasn't my dream, but I read the recorded declaration when I went under contract. It had the standard stuff: paint colors, grass height, trash bin rules. No weird clauses about surveillance drones or fines for waving to your neighbor. Property taxes weren't going to break me. So I shrugged and signed. 1 week before closing, a letter showed up in my email at 7:43 a.m. subject line: mandatory orientation and key deposit. Occupancy restricted until completed. I opened it on my phone in the parking lot outside my office. The property manager, a guy named Kip who wrote like a teacher's pet, had attached a PDF that looked official in the way that fonts make things feel official. Boxes, bolded headers, a clip art padlock, the works. It said I was required to attend an orientation meeting, pay a $200 new resident integration fee, and, my eyes tripped, provide one working set of keys to my new home for emergency and compliance purposes before the HOA would authorize occupancy. It read like someone was conferring permission to walk on my own grass. I scrolled to the bottom. There was a spot labeled Owner Initials and a line that said, "Failure to comply will result in a daily non-compliance fee of $150 and suspension of community access devices." I called my real estate agent, Maury. He's old school, the kind of agent who brings an extra pen and a calming voice. He said something I'm pretty sure he has never said to any client before. What on earth? He told me he'd never seen an HOA try to hold occupancy hostage over keys. He dug through the CC and Rs. I dug through the CC and Rs. We both found nothing about a mandatory key surrender. There was a section about allowing the HOA access to the exterior for maintenance of common areas, and one about entering a home in emergencies with law enforcement or a locksmith, with notice to owner if reasonably possible. There was also a part about the association having to adopt any rules at an open meeting and mail them to owners. No one had mailed me the text of any rule requiring keys. I wrote back to Kip and copied the board email address listed in the packet. "Hi," I said. "I'm happy to schedule your orientation, and I'll pay any recorded fee that's in the governing documents. Because this is a single-family home, I will not be providing a set of keys. Please cite the recorded declaration, bylaws, or rules where the key requirement is stated. Thanks," Kip replied at 4:06 p.m. with the speed of someone refreshing their inbox. "This is a standard requirement," he wrote, "adopted by the board under Rule 17. As the managing agent, we don't argue policy. Please bring a key to your orientation." There was no attachment of Rule 17, just the phrase Rule 17 dropped like a brick. I responded, "Please send the text of Rule 17 and proof of its adoption in accordance with the open meeting rules. Also, where is Rule 1 to 16? Radio silence, closed on Friday morning." I signed more times than a birthday card passed around an office. The escrow officer handed over the keys like they were giving me custody of a comet. I drove over to the house afterward because I wanted to stand in the empty living room and let the echo bounce off my smile. The maple out front was greener than the photos, like it had been conserving itself for me. I had painters scheduled for Saturday, movers on Monday. I'd packed everything in my apartment down to a single fork because I could live on burrito bowls and paper plates for a weekend. It felt good. Then Saturday, 8 a.m., while I'm pulling tape around the window trim in the living room, a white SUV with a magnetic sign that says Community Services parked across my driveway. A woman stepped out. She had a clipboard and a ponytail tight enough to deflect rain. "Morning," she called through the open door. "I'm Darla, the president of the HOA. Orientation?" I wiped my hands and came onto the porch. "Hi, I wasn't told to meet anyone today." She waved the clipboard like a baton. "We keep the neighborhood safe by being proactive. Orientation is now. Also, your key?" She said it like a dentist asking for your insurance card. "I asked the manager to send me the rule," I said. "I haven't received it." Darla smiled in a way that doesn't actually smile. "It's a board rule. We can adopt rules for the health, safety, and welfare of residents. The key is for emergencies and compliance. If we don't get one before you occupy, we'll have to suspend your gate fob and access privileges until you do. That includes movers." "There's no gate," I said automatically. then realized she meant the pool gate and the curved decorative entrance with "Welcome Home" stamped in cast iron. It has a short arm that raises and lowers, a gate like a drawbridge for golf carts. I was proud of myself. I did not raise my voice. This is a single-family home I own outright. You can't prohibit me from living here. You also don't have a right to my house keys. In an emergency, call the police or the fire department. The CC and Rs don't require this. Darla flipped a page. The board can adopt rules to clarify the covenants. We're very reasonable about key custody. The keys are sealed in a numbered envelope in a locked file at the clubhouse. Only I and the manager have access. No one is rifling through your underwear. I never suggested anyone would be looking through my underwear, I said carefully. I'm asking for the rule, she shrugged. You'll get it at orientation, Monday, 3 p.m. Bring a key. You scheduled an appointment for me? I asked, thinking of the movers who were currently loading my sofa at the storage unit. She circled something. We have very full calendars. Then I will send a written request for the rule under state law requiring associations to provide records, and I'll decline to give you a key, and I will move in today. Something in her expression sharpened like a paper cut. If you move in without authorization, you'll be in violation. You will receive fines. We'll also notify security that you are an unauthorized occupant and suspend device privileges. Unauthorized occupant of my own home, I said, because sometimes sarcasm leaks out before I can clog it. This is for the safety and welfare of all residents, she said. And then she got in the SUV and drove away like she'd already filled out the fine form in her head. I called my friend Jules, who is both my unofficial little sister and the person who taught me to read leases when we had roommates in college. They're trying to shake you down for your keys, she said immediately. That's wild. You better set up cameras. So I did. I installed 2 battery cameras, one over the front door and one over the garage. I put a sign in the window that said "Recording in Progress" because I believe in notice. I also changed the locks because I'd heard stories about builder keys. A locksmith named Owen who drank too much coffee came by and rekeyed the 3 exterior doors to new cylinders. He showed me how to pop the knob off to see if there were secondary pins set up for a master key. You're clean, he said, but change these anyway because who knows who the last owner gave keys to. He gave me 4 fresh keys. I put 2 on my ring, 1 in a fireproof box and 1 in a clay dish I made in a craft class, shaped like a leaf and crooked in a way I'm fond of. The movers came at noon. They had their own issues with the small driveway. I fed them pizza on the porch and tipped them like they were saving me from a shipwreck. We were hauling the last couple of boxes in when a man with a buzz cut and mirrored sunglasses showed up, flashing a badge from a security company I didn't recognize. Got a report of unauthorized move-in, he said. My name is on the deed, I answered. Would you like to see it? He squinted at it like he wanted to find a typo. We can't open the arm without HOA authorization, he said, gesturing back toward the entrance where a line of cars was forming because the arm was down and the call box was blinking. Someone must have decided this was the day to enforce all rules with the vigor of a gym teacher. I walked in, I said, pointing to my car parked on the street on the far side. I don't need your arm. He didn't have anything to say to that. He hung out by the sidewalk looking like he wanted to take down license plates. At 4 p.m., an email from the HOA arrived with the subject line, "Notice of Non-Compliance." It accused me of occupying without authorization, suspended my amenity access, and assessed $300 in fines for 2 days, today and anticipated Monday. It also said my bad faith refusal to provide the key would be noted in your file, which made me think of a teacher threatening to call home, except I am the home. I wrote back and copied 2 things. The law section I found with a quick search saying associations can't prevent occupancy, and the section of the CC and Rs that allowed entry only in an emergency or after notice and at reasonable times. You do not have the right to my house keys, I wrote. You also don't have the right to suspend my occupancy or prevent movers from entering. If you block access again, I will involve law enforcement. Jules texted me a talking point list that read, in all caps, private property, right to exclude, no self-help eviction, civil trespass. I set the thermostat, put a sheet on my mattress, and fell asleep to the kind of exhausted that knocks you out between blinks. At 1:13 a.m., my phone pinged because the front camera caught motion. I rolled over and grabbed it. The feed showed 2 figures walking up the path. One wore that same polo security uniform with a flashlight clipped to his belt. The other wore a windbreaker. They went up the porch steps. The security guy knocked once, which woke me up the rest of the way. I sat up, heart going like a jackhammer, and watched on my phone as the person in the windbreaker reached into a pocket and pulled out something small and shiny. A key. He tried the lock. My breath made a sound between a hiss and a squeak. The deadbolt didn't turn because I'd rekeyed it. He tried again, harder, then handed the key to the security guy and shrugged. The security guy knocked again and called, "Association, we need to verify occupancy." I hit the speaker on the camera. "Leave my porch. You are trespassing. You do not have consent to enter. If you don't leave, I will call the police." They flinched like they hadn't expected a voice to come from the doorbell like a ghost. The windbreaker person said something I couldn't hear clearly, then turned, and they both walked down the steps, looking around like maybe a neighbor would come out and give them the keys they wanted. The security guy did something stupid and petty then. He peeled my recording in progress sticker off the window and stuck it onto the railing like he was playing a prank in middle school. Then they left. I called the non-emergency police line. I explained what happened. The dispatcher was sympathetic but practical. "We can send a patrol car through and make a report. But if you want to pursue trespass charges, you'll probably be going to the magistrate with the video." "We're fine," I said. "I just want them to know I have the video." I saved the clip 3 ways: the app, my computer, and a thumb drive that looked like a cartoon rocket ship, because that was the one Jules had in her purse the day I needed a thumb drive once. At 7:05 a.m., I had a fresh email from the property manager. "During last night's compliance check," it began, which is a phrase that still makes my eye twitch, "our officer observed that our master emergency key failed to operate your lock. We assume you have changed your locks without notifying the association." I read it twice to make sure it said what I thought it said. They had an emergency master key to my house. "You are not authorized to maintain any keys to my home," I wrote back. "There is no such thing as an association master emergency key for privately owned dwellings in this community. Any attempt to enter without my consent is criminal trespass. Last night's attempted entry was recorded." They replied with PDF attachments, 3 of them, all scanned copies of something titled Rule 17, Key Access and Orientation Protocols. It looked like someone had drafted it in a hurry. It said owners must surrender keys and authorized random compliance checks. It said failure to comply was a violation and grounds for fines and suspension of privileges. It also had, at the bottom, effective immediately, and a date that was 2 weeks ago. There were no minutes showing a vote, no notice of the meeting, no signature from the board secretary, just a typed board of directors. I called my neighbor. I didn't know my neighbor yet, so that required making a neighbor. I picked the house with the faded cat decal in the window, rang the bell, and introduced myself. The person who answered, a woman with a streak of blue in her hair and an apron that said "Y'all means all," smiled like she had been waiting to meet someone who reads fine print. "I'm Mina," she said. "Darla already tried to tell me you were a troublemaker. That's a badge of honor in this place." We sat at Mina's kitchen table and I told her everything. She told me about the community Facebook group where everything turns into a debate about mailbox paint. She told me about last year's board elections where 3 friends ran together and won on a platform of standards, which in practice meant measuring grass with a ruler. She also told me a story that made the hair on my arms stand up. When she bought her house 3 years ago, the builder's representative had a ring of keys that opened a bunch of the houses at once. "A master key," she said. "Ours was supposed to be rekeyed before closing, but I still found a second set of pins in the deadbolt when I changed it. Owen, the locksmith, he showed me. You did the right thing doing it immediately." I left Mina's with a plate of cookies and a sense that my feet had landed on a moving walkway I hadn't asked to step on. It was Sunday. I wrote a demand letter. I am not a lawyer, but I am a person who can read. I pointed out that they had adopted a rule that affected fundamental property rights and safety, and that in our state any such rule required an owner vote. I demanded they rescind the rule, refund fines, and confirm in writing that no one was authorized to maintain a master key and that no compliance checks would be conducted at private homes. I also gave them a deadline, 5 p.m. Monday, and I said if they refused, I would seek injunctive relief, contact the appropriate state consumer protection office, and consider a civil action for trespass and invasion of privacy. I CC'd an attorney friend of Jules who owed Jules a favor from a housing dispute a decade ago. I figured the presence of an attorney's signature block might make someone stop to reread their paragraphs before hitting send. In case they didn't, I put up another camera on the side gate and another by the back patio. I used the latter like I was installing Christmas lights. except I was installing my sense of security. Monday morning, I called the police non-emergency again and asked if an officer could stop by during the movers' second run, just to be a calming presence with a uniform. The dispatcher didn't laugh at me. "We'll have a patrol in the area," she said. "If anyone tries to prevent your movers from entering a public street to deliver to your house, let us know." At 2:50 p.m., I got a text. "We're here early," from the moving crew. Great. At 2:53 p.m., a different text. "Gate arm down again." Less great. I jogged to the entrance where a little line of cars was forming. The security guy from before stood there, arms crossed. I walked up with a purpose I don't typically wear. "You don't have authorization to block my delivery," I said. "This is a public street for access. Lower the arm." He tilted his head toward the clubhouse where Darla stood looking like a general on a parapet. "Not until we get an okay," he said. A patrol car rolled up with timing I'm not too proud to call lucky. The officer stepped out and asked what was going on. I explained quickly and calmly. He looked at my deed copy. He looked at the arm. He looked at the cars lined up. A couple of residents tapping impatiently on their steering wheels. Then he approached the security guard and Darla, and the conversation that followed was one of those that happens under a cloud of patience. The officer explained that this was a civil matter, that they could not physically prevent my movers from accessing my home, that if the HOA wanted to enforce a rule, they could do so by fines but not by blockade. He suggested they lower the arm to keep traffic moving. Darla's mouth tightened, but she nodded. The arm went up. My movers came in like it was the release of pressure at the end of a very long day. At 4:45 p.m., 15 minutes before my deadline, an email arrived. It was not an apology. It said the board would consider revising Rule 17 at a future meeting, but for now, it remained in effect. It also said they had pulled my amenity access until I complied in good faith. Another fine posted to my account ledger in the portal. The note said, "Resident refuses to provide emergency key. Potential safety hazard, non-compliant." My ledger might as well have said, "We're used to people folding." At 6:12 p.m., my front camera pinged again. This time it captured someone in a windbreaker again, standing on the porch and peering into the sidelight window. He cupped his hands and looked at the entry table like he was checking for a bowl of candy. The motion light came on. He looked up into the camera, and for a split second, the face was clear. It was not the security guard. It was a man I'd never met, but whose headshot was on the community website with the title Vice President. He didn't knock. He just tried the handle, no shoulder, no finesse, just the brazen twist of a person who believes doors are suggestions. It was locked. He hesitated, then took a picture with his phone and walked off. The video caught the top of his head as he went down the steps. I sent the video to myself, to Jules, to my attorney friend, and to an email address I found for the County District Attorney's Community Liaison. The subject line I used was simple: person attempting entry without consent, association officer. I wrote one paragraph. This person attempted to enter my home twice in 48 hours under a purported compliance check, initiated by an association rule I believe is invalid. I'm concerned both for my safety and for other residents who may have surrendered keys. If there is a crime here, please advise me how to proceed. At 7 p.m., Mina rang my bell carrying a casserole because she is exactly the kind of person who knows when a casserole is useful. She also brought a folder. "Welcome to the neighborhood file," she said, setting it on my kitchen island. Inside were printouts of past board meeting agendas, copies of email notices, and a hand-drawn organizational chart Mina's kid had made for a school project about how things work, which was funny and cuter than most governance charts. I flipped through and found one thing I hadn't expected, a line from last year's annual meeting agenda titled Discussion Key Program. No minutes, no detail, just the line. "They've been trying to do this for a while," Mina said. "People grumbled, so they dropped it. Then they brought it back after two of their friends got on the board mid-year. They like to say it's about emergency response, but the fire department has Knox boxes for condos and high-rises. Single-family homes don't do that. My uncle's been a firefighter for 30 years. They don't want HOA keys. They'll break a door if they need to. That's their job." I stood in my kitchen with a stranger-turned-ally eating noodles baked with cheese, and I felt something steadier than adrenaline. Resolve. I was not going to be bullied out of living in my home. I was not going to give a stranger a key to my bedroom. Before I went to bed, I wrote one more letter. This one was to the entire list of owners I could compile from public records, which in our county includes names and mailing addresses. I wrote like I would want someone to write to me if I were busy and not paying attention. "Hi neighbors," it began. "I moved in on Saturday. You don't know me, and I don't know you, but I need to tell you what happened to me because it has implications for you too." I explained the key demand. I explained the attempted entries at 1:13 a.m. and 6:12 p.m. I included a link to a private video hosting page with the 2 clips. I attached a 1-page FAQ about what our state law requires for adopting rules, what emergency entry actually means, and what your rights are regarding keys. I put my phone number and an open invitation to call, text, or knock if they wanted to talk. I addressed envelopes until my hand cramped. Then I fell asleep with the television on a channel where the weather people talk like friends. By 8:30 the next morning, my phone looked like it had been dropped in a beehive. Unknown numbers, voicemails, a text that began with, "I'm so sorry, we gave them a key last year because we didn't know we could say no," followed by 3 crying emojis and a picture of a brass key on a red lanyard. My neighbor letter had arrived faster than I expected. Or maybe the speed came from people walking down their drives and handing envelopes to each other like we still live in a time when you pass news hand to hand. I made coffee and started answering. People's stories flooded in, each one adding a stitch to a picture I didn't know we were all looking at. A man named Ezra told me the manager kept a spreadsheet of who had turned in keys, and when he asked to see it, he was told it was confidential. A woman named Cora said her patio gate had been opened and closed while she was at work one afternoon. And the only reason she knew was because the little wooden wedge she uses, she calls it her dog ear, was inside instead of outside when she came home. A retired teacher with a voice like a favorite aunt told me she had come home early from a matinee and heard someone in her laundry room. By the time she got in the back door, the person had already gone out the front. She thought she had scared herself until she saw my video and realized she hadn't imagined it. I kept a notebook and wrote everything down with times and dates and the words people actually used, because if I'd learned anything in the past 48 hours, it's that details matter and that people who lean on rules and clipboards can't stand when you use the same tools correctly. At 9:17 a.m., the district attorney liaison emailed me back. The tone was careful but not cold. They said 2 separate things. First, if anyone attempted entry again, I should call 911 and state succinctly, "Attempted unlawful entry, suspect known," and provide the case number from the prior call. They also gave me a direct line for follow-up. Second, they spelled out that criminal trespass statutes in our state don't require that the person actually enter the dwelling. Attempting to enter after a clear warning can be sufficient, especially when nighttime is involved. If I wanted a protective order against a specific individual, the magistrate could hear it the same day if I brought the video. Jules squealed when I read her the email out loud. "You're getting a mini legal clinic in your inbox. I want to sleep without watching a camera at 1 in the morning," I said. "That's all I want." We printed the videos on paper stills with timestamps because the magistrate's office has a reputation for not loving links. We also burned them to a regular old disk like it was 2008. Then we drove to the courthouse, which is a square building with a clock that runs a minute slow. I filed a criminal complaint for trespass against John Doe the first night and known person the second, because I had the vice president's name and face, and asked for a temporary protective order against the latter. The clerk had me fill out a form with boxes that made me choose words like harassment and threat, and it felt strange to check those when the person hadn't shouted or broken a window. But there is a special kind of threat that comes from someone touching your doorknob when you said no, and I checked the box and wrote in the margin, "I have video evidence." A magistrate saw us at 11:20 a.m. There was no pomp. There was a desk and a plant and a basket of tissues because someone knew how human people are. I kept it tight. I explained the HOA's Rule 17, the attempted key entry, the nighttime visit, the second attempt by the vice president. I made it clear that this wasn't a neighbor dispute over a hedge. This was a private association with people who had access to keys. The magistrate asked 3 questions. "Do you know this person personally?" "No." "Have you told them not to come to your home?" "Yes." "On video." "Do you believe this will continue without a court order?" "Yes." He signed the order limiting the vice president from coming within 100 feet of my property or contacting me except through counsel for purposes of litigation. We left with a copy that still smelled like toner. I called a process server whose number was on a corkboard in the clerk's office and paid the rush fee that made my eye twitch, but my shoulders relax. An hour later, the process server called me. cheerful, like someone who enjoys delivering messages other people try to avoid, and said, "Served at the clubhouse." The gentleman didn't smile. While that was working, the HOA blasted a community update. Subject: clarifying safety policies. The body was a smoothie of buzzwords: responding quickly in emergencies, industry best practices, inaccurate rumors. They didn't say my name, but the vine was obvious. They promised a town forum later in the week to answer questions, which sounded like a plan to talk until dinner. I didn't reply. I filed. I submitted a records request for the rules adoption history, any minutes, vote counts, the security contract, the key custody log, and the list of homes that had surrendered keys. I cited the exact inspection rights statute and gave them 5 business days. Fair, but tight enough to stop the "we need a committee" shuffle. Next, I called the state real estate licensing board because the manager's email flaunted a license number. "If a licensee participates in or encourages unlawful entry," the staffer said, "we want to know." I sent the videos and the manager's line about our master emergency key. I also filed a complaint with the Consumer Protection Division about bogus occupancy authorization language. I wasn't chasing lightning bolts, just paper that makes other paper. While I was on hold, Mina texted, "Neighbors in my living room, lemonade, come now." I walked into a pop-up gathering that looked like a block party stuffed into a den. People had receipts, emails, screenshots, violation notices written like a hall pass to nowhere. Rafe showed a clip of someone in a windbreaker peeking over his fence at dawn. Lila said she got a violation for leaving a ladder out for 2 hours to clean gutters, and the proof photo came from her side yard. Ezra, who used to work in insurance, said he suspected the security company wasn't even properly licensed. In a neighborhood, you never know whose old job becomes the critical domino. It wasn't just a bad rule, it was a habit of touching other people's doors. We formed the Neighborhood Owners Coalition and set 3 goals. 1. Force a special meeting to rescind Rule 17 and, if needed, recall the board. 2. Get the fire department to the forum to explain actual emergency entry for single-family homes. 3. Draft neighbors willing to run if seats opened. Mina put her hand up without drama. Lila did too. Hugh, a retired accountant, volunteered to audit the books. I said I'd be the microphone person and keep pressing the legal side. The process server texted me a photo of the vice president holding the protective order I'd secured. Served. No thank you attached. I taped my copy inside the front window next to the recording in progress sticker. Paper can speak. The forum notice arrived with no filming in bold. I told them I'd be recording my own statement. No response. Meanwhile, the manager tried to stall the records request. We estimate 30 days. I resent the statute's 5-day deadline and warned I'd file to compel inspection with daily penalties. Then Theo called. He'd surrendered a key 6 months earlier before a long trip. When he returned, a small camera and his grandmother's tin of sewing notions were gone. He'd blamed himself until he saw my videos. His voice shook. I told him I'd go with him to the station if he wanted to report it, because a tin of buttons matters when it's yours. We delivered the petition, 46 signatures. We needed 39, like coins on a counter. "We'll verify," the manager said. Mina smiled. "You have 48 hours to schedule the special meeting. We already have the court template if you don't." The clubhouse packed out for the forum. Darla laced her speech with firefighter phrasing. Seconds matter. Safe entry. Then an actual firefighter walked in, apologized for being late, and calmly said, "They do not keep private house keys, don't coordinate with HOAs for entry, and will force entry in emergencies." The room tilted. I made my statement. Videos, protective order, adoption law, and a plain line. We are not a middle school. You don't get to put our names under bad behavior and hand out demerits. We own our homes. We choose whether to give you keys. The next morning, I got a cease and desist from the HOA's lawyer claiming my statements were defamatory. Milena, the attorney who'd stepped in for me, replied with the videos, the order, citations, and a litigation hold, and CC'd the association's insurer. Insurance companies do not enjoy the phrases trespass and key custody. By Friday's deadline, the HOA dumped a folder of PDFs. Buried inside, a tracked changes draft of Rule 17, a key authorization form, and gold, the key custody log. 3 entries showed date used, including Theo's address labeled wellness check. With no return noted, we took it to the police and the insurer. Paper moved fast. Our injunction hearing landed the same day as the special meeting. The judge granted it. Rule 17 likely unenforceable, likely adopted improperly, ongoing risk of irreparable harm. That night, secret ballots flew like quiet birds. Rule 17 was rescinded by a landslide. The recall passed. Mina, Lila, and Hugh took seats. The new board's first resolution: the association would never retain private home keys. All keys in custody returned within 48 hours. Compliance checks suspended. Written notice for any common area work near fenced yards. Emergencies verified by public safety only. They hired independent counsel to investigate, reported to the insurer, terminated the security contract, and refunded all Rule 17 fines with interest. The next day, brown envelopes with keys appeared on porches. The detective called. The former vice president insisted he was just checking the handle, but I signed the criminal trespass complaint. Soon after, the new board adopted a plain language policy: doors are yours. Since then, the pings on my camera are cats, packages, or Mina's cookies. The maple blushes early, and when I drop my keys into the crooked clay dish by my door, they make a small, firm sound, like a period at the end of a sentence I finally got to finish. Friends, thank you. See you soon.